And we're back. I want to ask a question. Wasn't there a lawsuit recently that a group of well owners had filed that pertained to these the very issues we're talking about?
Yes, there was. John Basta, who is the, I guess, vice chairman, and Frank Mazzario, who is the chairman of the Prump Well Owners Association, filed suit against the state engineer's office because of his attempt to come in and take a leadership role in limiting the amount of water a well owner could take. And they say in the lawsuit, it's all well documented, all the previous court decisions and water laws and that he doesn't have the right. Now that was heard here in Judge Wanker's office, her judicial chambers, I guess, and she denied it, which they've appealed to the state Supreme Court.
When you say they, who's they?
John Basta and Frank Mazzario.
Okay, so they were suing the state, right?
Yes.
And the state prevailed in that matter. But I remember I was in court when one of those hearings took place, and I was appalled at the attorney that they had. I'm not going to mention her name, but she botched that case up something fierce, and the judge was kind of saying, "Do you want to file something, an amendment or an addition to this?" And hint, and she's like, "Oh no," And
Tom, you have the classic David and Goliath story going on here. Right. We are our community is made up of 57% retired people, about 9,000 veterans here, and a lot of people don't have the money to kick in for attorney fees. When I looked into water lawyers that specialize in water law, they're $1,000 an hour. So unfortunately, us Davids had to do the best we could, and we had to bottom fish to find anybody to represent us. None of us, Kenny, myself, John, Frank, none of us are lawyers. We probably know as much about water law as the lawyers do, but we are up against massive corporations here. And Judge Wanker never bothered to hear the actual facts of the case when it finally did get to trial. She just ruled outright without. The paperwork is this thick,
Well, there's more to it than meets the eye, because I don't know all the facts. But first of all, why didn't you ask me first? The attorney that had the case, I never lost against her. I don't even have to try. I walk into court and she.
Well, now that you've stepped forward.
Yes, thank you for stepping up. That is quite wonderful.
I spend about 60 hours a week on community, just stuff for the community without getting paid a nickel. Kenny spends probably that much time too. We are doing it because we care about Pahrump, about the rural lifestyle here, and we don't like being pushed around by special interests. But we're not lawyers. We need legal help. We have a solid case. I would not have gotten involved if I didn't look at it over and say, yeah, as it's explained to me, this is solid. We are in our rights of but being in your rights and winning it in court are two different things.
Well, that's true, and also though winning it in court doesn't mean you're right or wrong. It just means that the case wasn't presented correctly.
Right, exactly.
And you can have all the facts on your side and butcher the job.
Right.
And I've seen cases go both ways. Or I've seen cases where clearly one judge, it was Judge Lane, and he was really upset that he had to rule against these property owners because they hired a paralegal to do their work for them, and he botched that all up as usual. And so Judge Lane had said, why didn't you just hire a lawyer? And they didn't. They would have won.
We knew the problems we had. We have nothing, Tom, as far as legal representation, as you know by listening to part of the case we were talking about. But we also had no. We don't have a kitty with millions of dollars in it. We need professional help to help us with this. If we do not maintain what's rightfully ours, then the entire valley loses. Generations into the future lose, and it's not right to have it, like you say, wrestled away from you because a judge has to make a decision, or in the case of state Supreme Court, because we simply didn't know how to present the case right.
The good news is this group, even if they lost, they represent only the whatever is it, the Pahrump Well Owner or Association. Another one could be created, and assuming there's issue preclusion, which if you can't bring the same exact issue up, but as long as you're kind of like in patent law, as long as you're a little bit different, you can get back in.
Well, we're not going to stop because we're in the right. And
largely, this was to jump out in front of SB 65 and 81, knowing that they were coming, looking at that legislation.
Yeah, and now that people are becoming educated about what we're talking about and seeing the injustices taking place in this plan that they're trying to stuff down our throat, and the actions by the state water engineer. I asked the state water engineer if he's watching this program, where has your office been since 1971? When it was known then that there could only be 27,000 people in Pahrump. Where was your office when you issued all these paper water rights?
Well, a lot of
where
these
were
were
you know,
agricultural
you've set this self up yourself, and we're the ones that are supposed to be the ones that are the fall guy. And I'll tell you where it's going to end here locally anyway in this county is this is a political hot button. I'll tell you, I would not want to be a commissioner and vote yes on that plan that's going to be presented to them, because that plan is a sham. It was laughed out of and shouted down at the last meeting we had. If they approve this plan just to tell the state engineer, well, we have a plan. You don't have a plan. That's not a plan. That's a plan for disaster. That's a plan to keep the status quo going for the developers and the utility owners. It's not a plan to solve the problem. This plan to solve the problem has to include a moratorium on building because we don't have any water to build out any further.
And if anyone's ever dealt with a utility, and I'm not going to mention any names of any companies in particular, but they become they are extremely arrogant. They call the shots, and when there's a utility company here locally that when they used to have an office that you could go to personally to pay your bills and have
that made it in the news.
File a grievance, and now you can't even they don't even have any way of dealing with the public, and that's their choice.
I think the best move I ever made was deciding to have a private well. I will never own a home again that's tied to a utility. And it's because of that. They have control. Well, they go before the PUC to get rate increases, which one of these utilities is doing right now. I think it's a massive rate increase that they're going for. And then they have to justify before the Public Utilities Commission. But the person that's bought the house and is dependent upon them for water and sewer, they're pretty much stuck. They have an umbilical cord. Whereas if you have private property like the three of us do with wells on it, septic tanks, we've cut the umbilical cord. Now, the overall reach of all of this is that the county wants to form a valley-wide utility. That is a cat that they don't like to see come out of the bag.
Wait, when you say the county, who are you talking about? Because there's a lot of people, when you say in the county, that may not want
Well, let's just say that we have a staph infection, okay? And we need some medication for it.
It's controlled. There's been 2 efforts in just the last couple of years to purchase utilities. There was an attempt by the county commissioners to buy the Pahrump utility for an exorbitant price, and then they tried to pass. Because people objected. They wanted to take over I guess it would be a semi-utility that Spring Mountain Raceway was putting in. It was a sewer plant out there. It's not really a utility, but it was encroaching on
that was an attempt for the county to get into the utility
But they wanted
business.
to get into the county wants to get into the utility business. If they get into the utility business, they can then charge you. See, they don't have to go before the PUC and get a rate increase. This is a cash cow for a government if they can control a utility. When I was in Tucson, we were on a private well co-op. We ended up signing it over to Tucson Water and Electric. My bill went from $12 a month to $122 a month, just like that, because
You got off easy.
For the privilege of having the
Tucson raised the rates.
town doing it.
Well, you got to
You don't
understand
have any
that
control over this.
government is not subject to PUC. The Public Utilities Commission only watches over private utilities that don't gouge their customers. Government entities, they can set their rates, whatever will keep them in the black.
So they want to get into
as far
utility
as getting a district, all they need is about 2 square inches somewhere in this valley, and they can annex in the rest overnight.
And that's because the government doesn't gouge.
Exactly, of course not.
So government is about expansion.
So I've been told. That's what Hillary would say.
I love it on their financial situation recently. They say, well, we cut 80 employees. I look at it this way: you had 80 too many employees.
Right. Well, aren't you going to wear your "I trust my government" hat next time we're on the?
Well, where are we going to go?
Yeah. Well, there's. I think the one other thing that's kind of important here, and we discussed in the legislative session and testimony, is that these water rights. They start out as a permit. You put in your crops. In the case of the desert land entries or whatnot, as a farm, you put in your crops. You have a permit to irrigate this. When you finally get done and your 160 acres, whatever, you're using X amount of water for that crop. Then it's certificated.
Yes. Okay.
At that point, it's certificated. You finally met all the requirements for this for these water rights, however many you needed for that project, and it's no longer permit status. But it's certificated for that project. Now, what's happened over the years, the agriculture industry is pretty much ended, and these guys have taken and subdivided their land, and they stopped farming. But these water rights are being moved across anywhere within the valley, and the whole manner of use have changed. But now, all of a sudden, they have priority because they've been applied to a subdivision. That they have priority over people who have been living in this valley for decades,
yeah.
to people who aren't even born yet. So
yeah, somebody from California that's not even born yet could have more seniority over the water.
Right,
here
based on paper
you
water
have,
rights,
Tom,
they're
or
not
I do.
even real.
You know, they could come in and just use water, and you and I could be, in a sense, cut off if we were threatening that senior. And yet, like Kenny was saying, they're not farming this land. They're turning it into quasi-municipal use of the land in a development. And this has been allowed to happen by the State Water Engineers Office. Our county planning department approves these development plans, turns them to the commissioners.
So does
the
state
commissioners
engineer.
rubber stamp it. And this has been going on, and nobody has watched what's going on unless you go down the meetings.
The state engineer signs off on these subdivisions
Yes, they
based
do.
on the paper water,
rights.
not the wet water.
And the state engineer's office knows
Yes, he
from
knows.
earlier reports that there's only could be 27,000 people in our valley. They know this, and now you'd have to ask them why. Now, one of the big issues they don't want to get involved is buying these paper water rights back that they issued, because like I said, there's about $37 million. But isn't it their responsibility?
Yes, we got to take a break, though. We'll talk
Okay.
about it when we get back.
Sorry about that.